good travelers, and welcome to another episode of Tales of Tavat, a Genshin Lore podcast. Last week, we went to Fontaine, where we daydreamed our lives away as we hung out with the Daydream Club in Petrichor. This week, we're going to be heading over to Natlan and going deep into the ancient records as we discuss the city and the area of Ochkanatlan.
Are you looking for family drama, dragons, betrayal, violence, and power struggles? No, it's not Game of Thrones. It's us. Enter our very own House of the Dragon over at talesoftavat.com, where our episodes with confusing, interweaving lore, like this one, have dedicated pages with visuals to help out your vertical pupils, curated by the lovely Tiff.
While you're on our site, check out our past episodes and seasons, artist spotlights from the community for every topic, and some other goodies.
Finally, feel free to email Albedo at talesoftavatpod@gmail.com to let him know what you thought of this episode and what topics you'd like to see in the future. Please remember that Chalk does have emotions, so don't say anything too harsh to him.
And think twice before you snap a piece of chalk in half.
Oh my god, okay, Yuki. My favorite moment in Fruits Basket ever when Yuki's girlfriend is like, I hate fresh snow.
Oh, you mean Toru?
No. Machi's like, I hate fresh snow and I hate a piece of chalk because it's so perfect and it has to be broken.
Know her. I just think of her as not Toru.
No, and then there's fresh box of chalk is placed in front of them at the student council meeting, and she's starting to panic, and Yuki's in the middle of giving a speech because he's the president, and he just clicks and breaks it. Perfect boyfriend, no matter who he's dating. Anyway.
Welcome to Tales of Fruits Basket.
Tales of Fruits Basket.
I was gonna say, I think we've referenced that so many times that I'm just going to point to another page and be like, the link's over there. Go watch it.
It's just such a good anime. I don't know. It's great. The manga's great too. Anyway, we're not here to talk about Fruits Basket, unfortunately. This week we're here to talk about Ochkanatlan. And like Brandon mentioned, there's a lot of dragons. So we're going to take you guys way, way, way back in Natlan history, like thousands of years ago, because this shit runs deep. So a quick refresher for travelers who maybe don't know a lot about Natlan history, because honestly, Natlan history is very confusing because it's probably the oldest lore that we've gotten so far. Back thousands of years ago, there were 13 dragon lords who ruled over a place called Natlantia, which, why? Why is everything Natlan? Natlantia, Ochkanatlan, Natlan, they're not very original. But these dragon lords ruled alongside the original Pyro Archon.
Yeah, I would say they were sort of like his generals or something. Like they served under him, but they were like over everyone else. Like there is the Pyro Dragon Sovereign, Shukoatl, and he was like the Pyro Dragon Sovereign, and then he had these 13 Sovereign Dragon Lords under him that sort of ruled over the different areas of Natlantia.
I hate it. And basically those 13 dragon lords, they could make decisions for the most part unless the sovereign came through and was like, actually, no. And they considered humans to be very primitive, and I guess they kind of were primitive. And I found that interesting because Remurians and Remus, like they found humans also to be very primitive, and I'm like, what was going on, guys? That we're just calling humans primitive everywhere, but it's a thing. And eventually the Pyro Dragon fakes his death.
Well, I don't think he faked his death.
He was like encapsulated in like lava or something, right?
Yeah, the wording is weird because they're like, he was frozen in lava. It's like, okay.
That doesn't really make sense.
Yeah. But I think what happened was, and this is actually interesting because they did look down on humans, but these humans were like the first humans that were brought over by the first descender or the heavenly principles, assuming that's the same person. Whereas like Remuria, I think, saw humans as primitives because they were rebuilding after the first flood or whatever. So that everyone was sort of separated and it was like a reset. But I think the dragons in Natlan were like, wait, like who are these humans? This is like a new race that was, and sort of brought into our house by the first descender. And when that original battle happened, where the first descender usurped the dragons, part of that whole battle ended up with Shukodal being encased in lava, but also was somehow put into the abyss while frozen in lava. And then everyone thought that he was dead for a long time.
And I feel like some of the lore suggests that he was hiding to make him seem good. Like, oh,
Yeah.
he went into hiding and he faked his death. Like, it depends on who you're talking to, who's your
Yeah.
narrator in this situation.
It's weird because later, so he's sort of trapped, frozen in the abyss, but then he reawakens later when Nibelung comes back to town. So Nibelung re-enters to that from presumably the abyss, and that reawakens Shukodal. So he wakes up, but he's been in the abyss for so long, he's now corrupted and is like slowly being corroded by the abyss. So he isn't really as vibrant and powerful as he used to be.
Mhm.
So I think depending on like when in the timeline people are sort of taking note of his actions, he might either be like frozen and not there and people think he's dead, or he might just be kind of like weakened and like behind the scenes and hiding in like a shadow of his former self because he was sort of on the decline.
So he might as well
Yeah.
not be there.
Yeah.
Basically, yeah. Well, he does at one point use a bunch of power to create something that we'll talk about in a future episode.
Mhm.
And that also is the point where he converts one of his eyes into a conduit of power that we will talk about in this episode. So those are two remarkable, very powerful things that he does after he reawakens from the abyss.
It's interesting too. I like how they explain him that once he was this like colossal serpent-shaped dragon with, he was all red and he had golden accents and he sounded beautiful. But then because of his abyssal corruption, he started turning black, which we've seen that seep into some people, like our little friend Caterpillar.
Yeah.
And our enemy, Arlecchino.
Your enemy, Arlecchino.
If you want to know what Shukodal may have looked like, you can fight that lovely boss at the end of the Natlan Archon quest, because that is the abyss taking the form of that dragon.
You know who else has the blackened fingers at one point? Hu Tao during the most recent Lantern Rite. When she's like in the depths of I guess it's the depths of the next world, the other side.
Interesting.
But just to take a quick step back to the Dragon Lords real quick, there were 13 of them. One of them is a Hao. We love him. Sassy little guy. He is like the only one to really have survived at this rate.
Yeah.
At the time, 2 of them survived, but then only he survived, buried in a mountainside. So the one Dragon Lord I want to make sure that we bring up, because she's going to be important later on. So just to give travelers a quick idea, one of our Dragon Lords is Ixlel. She has a very complicated name, but thanks to Paimon, we just call her Ixlel. Thank you.
Or would it be Ishlil?
Ixlel.
We'll just call her Ixlil. It's fine.
I'm about to call her Ix.
It's probably sh sound, but who cares?
Just the Dragon Lord. The Dragon Lord we'll be discussing, actually. So she ruled over a place called Chichen, which I thought was chicken originally.
Me too. I was all excited that it was called Chicken Uktaka. I was like, I want to make Chicken Uktaka.
I feel like that would have been if Alice came back and was like, did you know that chickens are the descendants of dragons, kind of?
That's our KFC. That's the KFC recipe. It's the secret herbs and spices.
But so Ixlel ruled over Chichen Aktoka, which is the land of 7 flames. And they originally built this as a base to what they called a stairway beyond Tavat.
Yes.
And this is the current like floating area that you can explore and that you do explore during our Little One quests, which we're not going to talk too much about Little One today. We'll kind of give some brief overview of what we do with him, but nothing crazy.
The best part about that is the Chichen or Chicken Uktuka, it was basically the base of what was going to be a space elevator. And I'm obsessed.
So I had to look up what a space elevator was
Mhm.
when doing this, like the research for this episode, and I deep dived way too hard into space elevators and the physics behind it, and like if the gravitational pull would pull it down, and
Wow.
Damn.
guys, it was wild. So for travelers who don't know, in IRL Earth, there is this like kind of thought process and idea of a space elevator. And the idea is literally what it sounds. It's like we're gonna put a giant pole into the sky and it's gonna go past the Earth's atmosphere and we're gonna put an elevator on it and it's gonna go all the way up. It's like the Space Needle in Seattle. Is that what it's called? The Space
Yes.
Needle? Yeah.
Hmm.
That it's kind of like that. Or like, if you wanted to go to the top of the rock in New York, like they're trying to create like top of the earth.
Just a really, really long elevator ride.
Yeah.
Which I want to know how fast it has to go. Like that elevator to get to the top of the One World Trade Center. I mean, that goes how many floors? And it's super fast. You could tell that you're going super fast. So how fast would this have to go? Would I need to bring rations on this elevator? Like, would there be a hotel at the top of the elevator? Because I feel like you can't go up and come down in one day. I have so many questions, but the idea
Yeah.
is basically like, all right, an elevator outside of our atmosphere so that people can see space and that we can explore, question mark. I'm not 100% sure. It seems very touristy, very like Xena,
Yeah.
girl of the future. But they were trying to make that to see beyond Tavat.
To get up there.
Yeah.
There was, just because you brought up New York made me think of it. There's a landmark building, One World Trade is as well, which is 104 floors, but the Flatiron building in Midtown Manhattan, or in Manhattan, should say in Manhattan. It's not that many floors. It's like 20, I think, maybe. People were afraid to work on the top floor because they thought they were going to run out of oxygen.
I love that. That would have been me.
And it's dwarfed. It's like it looks like a house next to some of the other skyscrapers and stuff. But can you imagine if anybody over in Natlan was just like, wait, can I breathe up there?
They didn't even care. They were like, I'm a dragon.
Yeah.
I can do whatever the heck I want.
Well, they created a ship to serve as like the satellite piece. So you would have
Yeah.
Chicken Uktuka down below. That's the base. And then they have this ship, which they call the Tanatua. So the Tanatua would be the ship that's like goes up past the sky. And then there's, something that's connecting the two that would lead from the ground of Tavat all the way up past the fake sky.
The Tanatua is kind of like your hotel in the sky.
Yeah.
Or like your halfway point, I guess. Like, here's where we're going to take the break because you can't do this in one day.
Tanatia was originally intended to be, that ship that goes up there, but I don't think it ever made it because Ochcon ended up tilting it over on its side and then leaving it like in the sky, not going all the way up past the fake sky.
Right.
Can I bring you all the way back to season 1? When we talked
Uh-huh.
about Jing Shou and the Feiyun Commerce Guild, we could not figure out why this boy wrote a book about spaceships. And we're like, how does he know about space? Like rocket ships, outer space, and all this stuff. And it's like, maybe that motherfucker went to Natlan. He knew.
Or read about it at least, he's an avid reader.
He was telling us back then, there's stuff you're going to learn. It was foreshadowing for lore.
I know if only he could see what we see, he'd have so much book inspo. But regardless of space elevators and how shook my mind is and how much more research I have to do on them, and I'm hoping to find a documentary on it. So if anyone has a documentary suggestion, hit me up. I would love to know. Please write to Albedo. This area, though, it didn't really take off, and Chichen Aktuka did eventually fall. There's not really a lot of understandings of what happened to that and why Ixlel stopped ruling over it, and there's really not a lot of information about the downfall of Ixlel. The other thing that's really important to know about her is that she was very interested in this well that is assumed to be the old core of Chuelel, Chuulel, and that at some point this well becomes of interest to Ochcon as well. But I don't know much about the well. I don't know much about Ixlel's downfall.
while Ishlel is ruling over Chichen Oktaka, trying to build her space elevator, she becomes sort of really interested in this pit and these caverns beneath the city, which becomes known as this core of Chulel. And it can be inferred that this is sort of what ends up powering the area of the city. So it's sort of like the power center of the city. But we also find out from other sovereign lords that that pit or that well that she's kind of fascinated by is a little scary. The other sovereign lords are kind of like creeped out by it because, as we find out later, there's a lot of abyssal activity going on in that area.
Right. And the one thing that we don't know is how she ended up in the well. Because later on, we find her in a well. So we don't know how she got in there. We don't know how she got trapped in the well.
But she's down there. She's down there, still alive, unbeknownst to probably some.
Right. And so we're going to leave the chicken land and just have an idea of this is what's happening at the physical later location of Ochkanatlan.
I just wanted to make sure it's clear that this area that she's ruling over, this Chichen Oktaka, that is what Ochkanatlan ends up being built upon. So that was sort of Ochkanatlan before it was Ochkanatlan.
Yeah, it's the physical location of Ochkanatlan eventually.
Right.
Meanwhile, while all of this stuff is happening, you have, I'm gonna mess this up so badly. You have Waxa Clanhun Uba Khan, or Kukul Khan, who is the Sage of the Stolen Flame. He is the son of the OG Pyro Dragon, who we talked about a little bit just before, Jokoro.
The younger brother.
Oh, I had it. I thought it was the son. It's the younger brother.
It's weird because he creates Kukulkan, but he's referred to as his younger brother.
Yeah, it's like, how'd you make your brother, boo? Like, how'd that happen?
Yeah,
that's not how that works.
You gave birth to your younger brother.
I mean, but he just like pulled them out of fire and made the other ones too. So
I think and he was the first dragon that Shukoatl created. So I think he gave him like extra powers or something.
This just sounds to me like surprise incest.
Girl, it is always surprise incest.
So we're gonna call him the Sage of the Stone Flame. He's the Dragon Sage, and he was the son, brother, twin, whatever, because he was born at the same time from the Pale Flame.
The Pyro Sovereign was created or born of the flame, and then so that's Shukoatl. Shukoatl then creates all the other dragons, but Kukulkan, or the Sage of the Stolen Flame, was the first dragon that he created, and was, I think, maybe rumored to be more powerful than others. It seems like maybe he was given some kind of special power or authority, and that's why he's considered, in the lore, he's referred to as his younger brother. But I think it's also fine to think of him as his son.
Regardless, the Pale Flame, born of Pale Flame, they also both fought together in the war against the Primordial One. So when that first happened, they were both present, which is kind of crazy because he's so fucking old.
Yeah.
So then he ends up ruling over Natlantia, which again is the civilization that was around prior to Natlan. It was ruled by Jokotl and these 13 dragon sovereigns, including the Dragon Sage, and they had a giant city called Tolan. And this is, where the volcano is now. If you've gotten there, if you haven't, you're fine. We're not going to really talk much about it. But the dragons ruled. It was very primitive for the humans. And Xbalanque ends up overthrowing them and becoming the first Pyro Archon. But the Dragon Sage knew at some point that shit was not going well for the dragon kind. Him and his fam, his brothers in arms, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And he decided to flee. And he stole a seed of phlogiston, and he ended up finding humans, and he ended up really falling in love with them and feeling like maybe we should do something to come together. Because he was like, these people are feeble, but they have passion.
Yeah, they have potential.
Yeah, it's kind of like Steve Rogers in the first Captain America. They're like, all right, we did not accept this guy into the army. He's very tiny, very scrawny, but with a super serum, he might become the perfect man and become Chris Evans. So that's kind of his thought process, the Dragon Sage. And he ends up teaching them like how to use phlogiston and things like that. And he helps them build their tribes up and everything like that. And eventually he has his son, Ochkan. And Ochkan is human and dragon. So he's like a dragon with a human soul, right?
Yeah, they describe him as a dragon mixed with the soul of a human.
Was he also pulled out of flame? Like, I don't know how he was birthed.
We
He
have
was
no
half
idea.
human, so I think Kukulkan was getting a little kooky with some people.
Who's the mom?
I don't know. Someone very daring.
I don't know because they
So
don't.
very daring. A scaly.
It was Al.
Oh my god,
Al
ow!
Yes, it was
realized
Al.
her dream of fucking a dragon. I think they don't really ever talk about mechanics of that. And I don't even know because we know that we later find out that Kukulkan was really into experimenting.
In bed?
Well, probably.
Well.
I mean, his brother is also his father, so there's a lot of weird experimenting going on. But I wondered when I first read about Ochkan being Kukulkan's son, of like, and knowing that he's like a dragon mixed with the soul of a human, that maybe he was just like a dragon, and then there was some kind of experiment done to infuse a human soul into him. Because Kukulkan was very cruel and would totally do that to his own child.
Would he maybe come from goop?
Maybe. But I also wondered if Ochkan was just created by some mystical means and Kukulkan kind of adopted him and raised him as a son to try to control him. I don't know.
It's totally possible. I mean, Kukulkan himself was literally pulled from flame and birthed. So there's a badillion things that could have happened to create Ochka, but we have no idea what it is.
He does refer to Ochkan as his progeny at one point, so that made me think it's more biological, but I don't know.
I mean, maybe it's one of those things where, like, I took the fang out of my mouth and I birthed you.
I mean, maybe he can make little pyro dragon babies too, like his older brother.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of magic in this area.
Did you know that I can make little baby pyro dragons?
Really?
What?
I've been testing it out. Got some experiments going on over here.
Ooh, what are their names?
I'm gonna name them after you guys, and they're gonna be the 13 sovereigns of the tri-state area.
A
Tri-state area.
tri-state. Can I be the leader of the Hudson Valley?
Yes, yes. You got no. Well, Hudson Valley, upstate New York, same thing.
No. Upstate New York is someone else, someone much colder and more country. Anyway, my dragon heritage aside, that's really kind of where we start off when we're finding Ochkanatlan, because now you have little baby Ochkan, and he's like, I am the sacred lord, and I am a dragon mixed with a human. And his dad had a lot of high hopes for him. He was like, one day you're gonna kill the dragon sovereign.
Your uncle.
Your uncle / grandfather, really depending on how we're looking.
Shakespearean bullshit.
Uh-huh.
And you're going to take over the throne. And you're going to lead us. And you're going to bring the humans together with the dragons. And we will coexist. And it's going to be great. It was very like high, mighty thought. Like he put a
Yeah.
lot of hope into his little pyro baby.
Mhm.
And so he actually ended up growing up amongst the tribes, and he grew up amongst the people. And one day the dragons were like, no, you're our prisoner. Because of course his father, he's just gone. He deadbeat, just left.
Well, that is so surprising in Tava.
At least Timmy's dad died. Like, his
He
dad
had the
just left.
decency to die.
Yeah, he had the decency to fucking die, but before leaving his son behind. And they like literally the dragons just one day come and they like rip him out of the tribe, and they're like, you're coming with us, you're our slave now. And then they like threw him into a cage with the shops. Like, what is happening? I'm sorry, like, isn't my dad / brother / creator, like, isn't he one of you? Like, is he one of the 13 lords? Why is this happening to me?
I thought Kukulkan might have been involved in observing and experimenting on him while he was with these bishops. Is that not?
But did he know? Like, like, does he know his dad's on the other side? Or
Oh,
is
I
he
don't.
like, where's
I
dad?
don't know. I doubt it. I'm not sure.
My dad left me. With the shappy chaps.
Meanwhile, like his dad is basically the mean version of Orobashi
Yeah.
with his like lab coat on.
Yeah.
Like, let's see what goes on with these bishops.
It's very Papa from Stranger Things, like the doctor who
Yes.
experimented on
Yeah.
Eleven. But yeah, so they threw him in with the Vishops and they watched him like a little experiment. And they're like, wow, he's surviving. That's surprising. And he's surviving and sharing his food with the Vishops. He's so kind. How did we make a kind little dragon boy?
Yeah, he's like displaying the best qualities of a dragon and a human
Yes,
For now.
for
for
now.
now.
Yeah.
And then at some point he ends up escaping the prison with help from his father, question mark. And they seem to come up with a rumor that his father killed him. So they stop looking for him. Did I understand that correctly?
Interesting. I didn't find that in the lore, but I wasn't looking too deep into that part of it.
That was the way I read it. So please feel free to, travelers, let me know if that's not right.
I do know that like he's imprisoned for a while, is like with these bishops, and then somehow is like released or escapes or something. I just know that later he's free.
Yeah, and I remember there were minimally rumors that he was killed. So I don't know if his father helped him out, if he just escaped and those were the rumors that spread, but he got out.
Yeah.
And he ends up meeting up with Xbalanque. And he decides to follow Xbalanque.
Yes.
Xbalanque, ends up becoming the first Pyro Archon eventually, but at this time he's an outlander to Natlan, and he actually is the one who brings the tribes together.
He's a good guy.
Yeah, and Xbalanque, yeah, it just says shows great compassion to Ochkan, who, up until now has been treated like shit.
Mm-hmm.
And Ochkan basically becomes obsessed with his best friend.
Yeah.
He's like, Xbalanque, I love you. I'll do anything for you. Can I be your best friend? And it's like following him around, recruiting other members to be a part of his gang, and just becomes enamored with him. And then, as we see later, that it turns into a very unhealthy obsession after Xbalanque pieces out.
Yes. And Xbalanque, he brings these tribes together and he goes and he gets a crown from the Lord of the Night. And he is the one who ends up fighting Xocotl, the pyro dragon, and turns the skies black and blah, blah, blah. And he ends up dying. But then he's revived because Renova, and if you don't know who Renova is our shade of death, our little red-eyed thing in the sky, very creepy. And she's basically like, bro, look at the future. It sucks. Do you really want to take over? And he's like, I don't fucking care, ho. Give me your strength. Let me set up the Night Warden Wars. Let me make these people stronger. And he sets up all the rules that we know today in Natlan with how they're fighting the Abyss, the Night Warden Wars, the spell to bring people back. That was all set up back then.
Mm-hmm.
And when he ascends to become the Pyro Archon, the first Pyro Archon, he leaves Ochkan in charge as king. And he's like, here are my rules. And the rules are basically like, be nice.
Yeah, coexist peacefully.
And Ochkan goes, got it, survive at all costs.
Yeah.
Got it. Worship you as the god of Natlan. Force everyone to also worship you. Become obsessed, even more obsessed with you. Denounce dragonkind and ensure that humans are treated as superior to every other being in Teyvat.
You know who it kind of reminds me of?
Who?
Spike.
What?
From Buffy.
Buffy's like, protect Dawn at all costs. And he's like, okay, I'll protect her, but I'm also going to make a sex bot of Buffy. Because Ochkan would have totally made a sex bot of Xbalanque if he could have. And I'm going to protect Dawn, aka protect the humans, but I'm also going to kill anyone in my way and make a fun little robot of my lover who doesn't know that they're my lover.
That's a fun parallel.
Meanwhile, Xbalanque was like, I was just trying to go like the Bill and Ted route of just be excellent to one another.
I also want to let anyone know who has seen Buffy that Amanda has not seen season six yet. So
I don't even know what season we're on.
we just finished season 5.
I feel like we're simultaneously on season 2 and 12. Just because we've been watching it for so long.
I know.
But he leaves Ochkon in charge, and at first things are okay. Ochkon actually helps bring together the Grand Alliance, which is the treaty I thought we were talking about earlier, where they brought the six tribes of Natlan all together with the idea of making Ochkonatlan and having like a united nation together. But at some point, Ochkon becomes not a fan of sharing that power, and he does end up not wanting the Grand Alliance anymore, but we'll get to that.
I feel like that was the human side of him. It's like Lord of the Rings, like one ring, and all the men are like, yeah, maybe we'll just keep that. We
Yeah.
don't need to give that back.
But at first, they go and they build this city of Ochkonatlan. And now there's not a lot of information about what life was like in Ochkonatlan, what building Ochkonatlan was like. We talked earlier about the city of Chichen Octoka, which was ruled by Ixtla, one of the Dragon Lords, and how Ochkonatlan was built on top of that. So we really don't know, like, did they just reuse buildings? Did they flatten everything? There's not a lot of information about this build. All we do know is that it was beautiful in Ochkonatlan. It was said to have all these, like, water features, and it was bright and golden, and it seemed great until it wasn't.
So we know that he was besties with Xbalanque. Xbalanque pieces out. He comes into power. He creates the Grand Alliance because at first he is obeying Xbalanque's wishes and peacefully coexisting, bridging that gap between dragons and humans. But then he starts increasingly becoming more pro-human and more anti-dragon.
Hated his own people.
But that,
Well,
makes sense.
I guess not people. He was picking a side.
I know that, Ochkon is evil, right?
He
Yeah.
becomes evil, yeah.
I mean, he makes Turnfire. Like, that's pretty evil.
Yeah.
I just feel like his trauma up until this point makes it all make sense. Like, when you're, originally learning about Ochkon in the game, you're kind of like, ugh. But then you're like, oh my God,
yeah.
the dragons literally tortured him. His father, quote unquote, abandoned him. The dragons held him prisoner. They threw him in with the shops. They wanted him to die. And then,
Yeah.
here's the first human that Ochkon becomes friends with after that. And he's like, oh, my hero. Huh.
And then Xbalanque is like, peace out, buddy. See ya.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now he's abandoned again, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't really give him an okay to murder.
Okay, there's never an okay to murder unless you're my character in my D&D campaign.
But I think it makes sense that he would have this prejudice because he's been tortured by dragons since he was born, basically, and been treated, he grew up around humans. He was then imprisoned by dragons, then was freed, and then immediately was shown kindness again by humans. So he has it in his mind, dragons are bad, humans are good.
Yeah.
And he became so obsessed with Xbalanque, and Xbalanque becoming the first Archon who became that by defeating the actual dragon sovereign.
Mm-hmm.
He became this larger than life symbol of humanity versus dragons. So when Xbalanque left, it was sort of easy for him to obsess over it and be like, God, Xbalanque, what a perfect god of humanity. Everyone should be as obsessed with him as I am. Let's all show some respect to, Xbalanque. And since he was in power and it was a little bit unchecked the time being, it makes sense to me that he would sort of slide into that, especially being very mentally unwell.
I also think it's really funny because it's no one was being unkind to Xbalanque, Ochkon. He saved the humans and the humans were all like, woohoo! So the idea that he's overly defending him when there's really not a reason to be doing it.
I know. I took it that way because Xbalanque had to defeat Xueqotl to, you know what I mean? He had to lead a whole sort of rebellion against the dragon sovereign just because the humans in that land were not being treated well overall by them.
And is it safe to assume then that Xbalanque is the reason that Hao is the way he is today?
What do you mean?
Well, not the
Angry?
sass. No, it seems that he was always angry. But no, like do you think because like we
Oh,
know
like you
that
mean like
he
a Hal being like, these humans, if only the dragons were still in power.
no, like a How being in a bracelet. Like it being
Oh,
pixely, like we know that Xbalanque defeated the Pyro Archon, but what happened to these Dragon Lords?
yeah, I don't think we know how he ended up in the bracelet, right? It was just discovered in some old ruins, right?
Yeah, because like we know wasn't the only one who survived. But
Mhm.
I don't know. It's a question for another day. But just like a thought, like is Xbalanque the reason a How is a pixel person and not like the OG dragon? I don't know. I got
Or
questions.
was it Ishlil who did it?
Yes. Yeah, we don't know. So
Hmm.
while Ochcon is starting to have these thoughts, right? He's breaking up the Grand Alliance because he decides he doesn't want to share the power. And he quote unquote came to believe that for the sake of all of humankind, they could not allow the tribes to overstep their bounds and claim kingship. And that any possibility of a revolt must be eliminated, which, great job, buddy.
Yeah.
The Scarlet-Eyed hero is going to come your way. So he destroys the Grand Alliance. He becomes a dictator at this point, and this is when he starts looking into a well.
Oh, well, before we get into that, I just wanted to say once he's sort of has become that tyrant, that is sort of where you might want to go back to the previous episode we did on Oshkonatlan, which is season 5, episode 92, the Unfinished Reverie artifact set. And that covers what I think of as the Scarlet Eyed Youth group,
Yeah.
who eventually would go on to overthrow Ochcon the Tyrant. And then the Scarlet Eyed Youth, of course, goes on to become the second Pyro Archon. But that's sort of where that whole storyline falls in the greater Ochconatlan story.
And also, before we get into the well, at this point, he's starting to also break the rules that Xbalanque set forth for him, and he's fighting it back against anything that is threatening humans. And it actually reminded me a lot of and Eternity after Makoto's death. Her thought of like anything that's gonna impact eternity, I want out.
Oh, right.
There is like a similar thought process here amongst the second in commands. Like, Makoto was in charge and A was the second. Jabalanque is technically in charge and, Ochcon might be the second there. And it seems like these second in commands are like lost at what to do once their man dies.
Mm. Very grief stricken.
Yeah, thank God Ningguang didn't do that when Rex Lapis died. We would have sank thanks to child. So then we get to the well, and at some point as he's starting to lose his mind, Ochcon starts trying to drain a well.
So Ochcon, is having all of his servants in Ochconatlan drain this well and then excavate. They have to drain water out of it and excavate it. And as his workers are doing this, they start having crazy hallucinations. They start getting these weird diseases and dying. And actually, I think all of the work groups, except for one, all die as they're excavating. Eventually, they actually excavate none other than Ishlil, aka the ninth of the 13 sovereign lords. Again, like we mentioned earlier, we don't know how she got stuck down in this well, but she did and was down there for a while. And then she suddenly gets freed. Ochcon, not wanting any witnesses to this actual dragon sovereign lord coming back into play, decides that the logical next step is to burn all of his workers alive.
Hmm.
Insane. Like,
Yeah. It's like, oh, y'all shouldn't have seen that. Bye.
Yeah.
And just burns them all alive. There is one survivor who is Monku, who we talk about in that previous Ochconatlan episode I mentioned, episode 92, Unfinished Reverie. Monku survives because I think a drop, like a golden tear or of presumably Ochcon's falls into his eye, and it gives him visions and knowledge of the layout and everything, so he's able to escape the burning and the fire. And then Monku, of course, goes on to join the Scarlet Eyed Youth group and helps overthrow Ochcon later. But yeah, so they excavate Ishlil. Ishlil is like, oh, finally, I'm out of there. Good Lord. It has been so long. Do you have any delicious people to eat? No, I actually don't think she ate people, but
Imagine though, Ochan be like, burn too.
she's like, no, man, did you have to burn them? Like, these
Could have
could have
just
been
eaten them for
edible.
you. Yeah.
But no, she's like, finally, I'm out of there. And then she's like, oh, you saved me, Ochkon. I know who you are. You are our sovereign's nephew. And so, knowing that Ochkon has this royal blood, she sort of goes against her instinct to fight him and take back her city because again she used to rule that city that became Ochkonatlan, but because of his royal blood she kind of steps down and goes along with him, and she starts giving him all of this knowledge about the ancient dragon civilization and sharing that with him, saying this is what it used to be like. Here's all these things that happened. Here's all of the power of the dragons. We knew all of these things that happened, including something with the Moon Sisters, just sharing all this crazy information and not realizing, I guess, that Ochkon is losing his mind, is power hungry tyrant, is pro-human anti-dragon. So he freaks out because of this, and due to his obsession with humanity, decides to get rid of her. So he seals her in a giant statue underground and then rips her heart out and into a bunch of pieces and hides them in various devices, like you do to all of your enemies, right?
Mhm.
I just like can't imagine doing that. Like
I'm
Really?
very glad that you can.
Yeah, I'm like, I think it's normal to not be able to imagine it.
I just like I can't imagine my thought process of being like, oh my God, I'm meeting like this dragon lord, right? Like this is like my distant relative probably. And they're so cool and they're so powerful and they start lore dropping on me, right? And like give me all these family secrets.
It's like your greatest fantasy. It's like, I wish. Tell me all the secrets of Teyvat.
But then like for me, I'd be like, oh my God, we need to write these down. Like, can you talk again? We're gonna get a scribe. And he's like, burn.
Yeah.
He just like murder in his eyes. He's basically like, you're a threat to eternity again, right? Like,
Yeah,
but in his mind, it's you're a threat to humanity.
humanity, right?
And so apparently is whatever Moon Sister lore you dropped that I didn't get to find out, you bitch.
I know.
Ochkan, you couldn't have written it down somewhere for me?
Also, where are the plans for the space elevator? Because that sounds awesome.
Yeah, like, can we at least get the facts before we kill people?
Yeah, where are the blueprints?
Yeah.
Yeah, he didn't do it right. He wasn't a good dictator.
So he seals her in this giant statue. She's kept there because her heart's hidden in various devices around the area. And for a while, he decides to siphon her energy to power the city. So he uses her as a giant battery.
She's like the Energizer Bunny.
Yeah.
She's like Forcelor.
Oh,
Kind of.
yeah. With the, what is it called? Indemnitium?
Yeah, over in the opera house.
But with the Oratrice Mécanique de l'Église Cardinal.
Mhm. So I don't know how he figured out how to do this, by the way, but he's siphoning Ishl's energy
Yeah,
to power the
what?
city.
Like, where did you learn this? Because your dad's gone.
I guess
Like,
it's because, the giant statue he seals her in, it's in the core of Chu'ulel, but this is the old core of Chu'ulel. And that was, I guess the area that powered the old city, the chicken city.
Mhm.
And so he traps her there in that old core area. And he's like, I'm just going to use this energy with your power to charge up and energize Ochkonatlan
Yeah.
2.0. But that worked for a while, right? But then Ishlil become, her bitterness and her resistance to him becomes so unreliable that he eventually stops and creates his own new core of Chu'ulel, which will come into play later. But he creates that separate from the old one and just kind of leaves her there to rot.
And then he puts her back underwater. That shit is
Yeah.
all filled up with water when we finally make it down to her at some point.
I guess we don't know if he filled it with water, but it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, they probably just pumped the water back in.
That was torturous to you? Sounds good. Let's put you back.
Right.
he's like,
Yeah.
I don't like you anyway.
And that's not the well, right? Like, we've never seen the well.
We have access to the old core area.
We saw a well, though?
Well,
Well,
Yeah, I think that it's more so like, what do you think is a well, right? Like this isn't like, Lassie went to get it because little Timmy fell in a whale. Fell
he
in a
fell in a
whale.
whale. Damn, Timmy.
But the old core is like a location you can visit in Ochkanatlan.
Yeah, I don't know what it used to look like
Yeah.
because remember they had to drain it and then excavate it. So they were also like lifting like giant structures out of it in order like before they even found her.
Mm.
So to me, she maybe like went down inside it, then it got like flooded or collapsed or something, and then they had to dig all of it out.
Yeah, and
Okay.
I think the waypoint for the old device is like somewhere on the right, like side of Ochkanatlan, like, but it's there.
So
Mhm.
you think maybe she actually he put her back down into the well that she was like the almost the exact same spot that she was in? Because that's very well-ish. It's very well looking.
Yeah.
It could be that he put her right back in the same spot and just changed the core and like the power
Yeah.
source. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe.
Because what ends up happening here is she at one point refuses to power anymore. She is like, no, no, little man. He basically wants her to start powering the source mechanisms as well, which, the source mechanism is what we actually use in the Archon line to talk to the Night Kingdom, the ruler of the Night Kingdom. I wanted to call her the mother of the Night Kingdom. That was incorrect.
Lord of the Night.
And she's like, no, I'm not gonna do that for you. And that's when he's like, okay, fuck you. And he does all of this. And he makes a new core. And he ends up enslaving, that is the words they use, his dragon part, like the dragon part of him,
Mhm.
and putting it into the new core to power it. Which I was like, bro, what? Now, at this point, I think the citizens of Ochkanatlan, the humans who live there, they're like, what's happening? We had a dragon helping out, now we don't. We have power sources, now we don't. And at the same time, Ochkon is going around being like, we have to find anything related to the dragons and we need to burn it and we need to destroy it. Because I feel like finding Ixlel made him realize that like they're on top of the dragon city and that, there are things that need to be gone. He's
Mhm.
learned all this lore from her and he's like sending people out to destroy things and this is where, as Brandon mentioned, we have the Scarlet-Eyed Hero. Now, we do go into much detail in the other episode about it, but the gist that you need to know is that the Scarlet-Eyed Hero came back from exile, question mark.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
he apparently lived here originally and then was like, I'm exiled, but then he comes back.
Mhm.
It's like that, I'm alive, now I'm dead. Now I'm alive, now I'm dead. That's the vibe that he's giving off, but I'm exiled. And he is able to put together a ragtag team of people. Monku really being the most helpful because he kind of has insider knowledge. There's a romance between the Scarlet, like there's a love triangle, I should say, between Monku, the Scarlet-Eyed Hero, and the woman on the team.
I think that it was more of a romance, and I think you interpreted it that way as a triangle because I don't remember the Scarlet-Eyed Youth having any kind of concrete like romantic vibes with what was her name? Sakak?
Suck it. It was
Sakak?
suck it. Suck because it sounded like I said suck it.
So that's why you thought it was a triangle because the
Yeah, because her
Scarlet-Eyed
name
Youth
was
is like,
Suck It.
hey, suck it, and she was like, what?
She's like, what do you need me to do?
And Mom was like, excuse me.
Oh my God. I don't know. I like the idea of a love triangle. They do end up overthrowing Ochkan. Now, they are only able to overthrow him because he has weakened himself. Idiot. So while his dragon half is in the energy source, as this whole fight starts happening, he ends up also putting his
Consciousness.
consciousness in there. His conscious was way out the door. And he like, what would you call it? Does he fall asleep? Is he in a trance? Like he's just stuck there.
It's some kind of stasis.
Yeah, it just says he's stuck in it. So I don't know how or why he's stuck in there, but he's stuck. Maybe it's because his body is getting smacked around and then transformed.
And so he gets overrun. He gets overruled. The Scarlet-Eyed Youth ends up taking over, and then at some point the Scarlet-Eyed Youth becomes the second Pyro Archon. I'm not 100% sure what happens to Xbalanque, but that is not really important for Ochka And so after this, Ochka kind of disappears. No one lives there. The people all leave. It seems like they all kind of are like, oh, that was fun. I'm gonna go back to the Feather Flower clan
Yeah,
now.
let's go back to the mainland.
Yeah, I'm going home.
Mhm.
This was fun, guys, while it lasted. And meanwhile, we go back to Kukulkan, the father brother
Mhm.
of Ochkan, and he goes back for his body and his soul, basically. And he's like, all right, you were defeated, and I'm coming back. And he also leaves his own self-proclaimed exile. So all these people exiling themselves. He comes back to collect Ochkan's soul. And his soul ends up being put into the body of a black dragon monster, and he is kind of like terrorizing the area of Ochka Natlan for who knows how long.
Mhm.
At some point, a group of adventurers goes out Ochka Natlan, and they all but perish but one.
Yeah, I think they said it was like 10 years after the cataclysm. So we're back to our 500-year mark because everybody loves the 500-year mark.
Yeah.
And we have no idea how long it was empty for, right?
No, I mean, if we think about it, if the Scarlet-Eyed Hero was the second Archon, that was quite a while ago.
Yeah. And I think it just says thousands of years ago.
Because when was Moeka made the Pyro Archon? We know that she was the Archon during the Cataclysm, and that's why she yeeted herself into the future.
Hmm.
But do we have any idea, like, how long she was in charge?
If we go by the fact that at that point, with her at least, they were humans, we're not really led to believe that they have extraordinary long lives. Like they're not like Sitlali-ish kind of things. So it seems like they put it very close to like she became the Archon. She was hanging around as the Archon for a bit and then the Cataclysm happened. I don't think she aged well. Maybe it was not that she didn't age well. Like I don't think it was very long. Like I want to say like it was probably like 20 years maybe. Like I don't think it was hundreds or anything like that.
Okay, because I know, like, Xbalanque was human. So it's like they've always been human, the Archons. So I wasn't sure.
Oh, but that's true. And he lasted really long too.
Oh, I don't know how long any of them lasted. It looks like there's been 7 people who have been the Archon.
If the Archon gets a blessing to last longer, and I mean, and also be able to eat yourself into the future, if we look at her sister was a little kid, and then we get that notebook later on after she grows up and stuff. So I still feel like it wasn't that long.
Well, she would have died either way
Yeah.
because she was just a baby human.
Yeah, but like I think she was a baby human when the cataclysm happened too.
Mm.
Oh, but no, that's just when she became the Archon. I don't know. I've gone down this whole rabbit hole for nothing. So I apologize. I have nothing to offer there.
I think it's a lot of thought. I mean, Archon-wise, we know Xbalanque was there. We know we get the Scarlet-Eyed Youth. We know at some point in the manga, they mention Murata. There's the Archon of Cochinina, and they were involved with like a crisis at the People of the Springs. So that's how we know their name. And then there are 2 other Archons that get like mentioned in our little like ancient name item,
Mm-hmm.
but we don't really know much about them. And then you have Moeka, who was in charge twice.
Yeah, and so somebody had to be in charge in between there too.
Yeah, I'm like, who was it? And was there more than one? Because
Yeah.
you're right, Tiff. If 500 years ago Moeka was they were living normal human lives, you would have had to have had like 5 Archons in between
Mhm.
Moeka and Moeka.
Also, I mean, if Xbalanque becomes the first Pyro Archon, I know that Natlan's like a little different from the other nations,
Hmm.
but does that imply that this is around the time of the Archon War? Because we know when that was.
Oh, that's a good point.
Maybe that can be sort of the defining timeline.
Yeah. Because there was no Archons before the Archon War, right?
Right.
That's a great point, Brandon.
So that would have been like what, around 2000 years ago?
Something like that. And then another interesting thing, and I know this isn't really about Ochkanatlan, but it kind of goes into this conversation, is the fact that there have been 7 Archons in this nation since then. And Moeka did it twice, so 8 if you want to count her twice. everywhere else it said 1 to 2.
One. Yeah.
And isn't that strange? Like, I don't know if that's just being like, Natlan, you fucked up in how you picked your archons, or like what?
I mean, I just took that as also like a part of Natlan's culture is the heroes of each generation.
Yeah.
So kind of being celebrated. So don't they kind of have like a natural human lifespan for each archon since they're human?
Well, the only thing that goes against that is the 500 years between Moika rules.
Mm-hmm.
There would have to be more than 7 archons then, because Xbalanque and the Scarlet-Eyed Youth and Murata, based on when Vanessa happened, all 3 of those were before Moika. So that leaves Moika and 3 others. And if they lived a natural human life, there would have had to have been 5 to 7 archons between Moika and Moika.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Lolly is never really said to not be a human, right? And she's lived for hundreds of years.
Yeah, I don't know what her situation is.
Yeah, but the 7 we know about aren't necessarily the only ones, right?
That's a great point.
Yeah.
Although I would think that, and this is something that actually does bother me, is like we don't know who the Archon was before Moika became the Archon the second time.
Mm-hmm.
And it feels like that would be recent enough that maybe we should know that.
Yeah.
And it's very confusing because you're right. Like, been 7 that we know of, 8 if you count Moika twice. But we don't know, and it's very frustrating to me because we don't really have a perfect timeline for anything in Natlan.
Yeah.
And there's definitely a lot of missing lore still. I mean, why have we heard nothing about Murata?
Yeah. And why is Celestia okay with it not being a god?
Oh, they don't care. They just need someone to
They're
hold their
just
feet.
like, the ley lines are fucked, so we don't really care about you.
I'm hoping we'll learn more when they give us Marriage of Ari.
Oh, so excited. But Archons aside, I will go off of my tangent. Tiff, I know you know a little bit more about this adventurers group than I did. Did you want to throw anything in about them?
Well, they went to look for some hidden treasures. There was a rumor that actually, I don't know if at this point we know that it's necessarily a made-up rumor in the story. These adventurers went up there because they were told that there's just been years and years and years of saying treasures, but they were told that there is a treasure that could repel the abyss. So it's like they're not just going up there just because they want like some kind of gold. They actually want something that's going to help them out because they are fighting the abyss at this point. So it was a group of people from, I think, basically always the Flower Feather clan, because they are the ones that are right there.
Mm-hmm.
So they got a fantastic name of the Ochkanatlan Adventures team.
So creative.
Yeah. They went all out. And that was about 10 years after the cataclysm when they went up there, and they died. All but one died. So there was only one that didn't die, and her name was Irawu. She came back and she went back to the Flower Feather clan, and she told them about these horrors. And they decided at that point I think at that point they already knew people weren't really supposed to be over there. But at that point, then they started putting like actual like people on patrol to make sure that people weren't going over there. After this group of people died, they were like, it's really, things are really important not to go there, because there's always been people, money hungry people trying to go for Mora and whatnot. But at this point, they're like, no way. So Irawu actually went back. She told her stories. She helped raise one of a daughter of the team leader, Taiku, I think is the way you would say his name. That's the way I would say it. And that is Bona. We do end up meeting her in our quest, but at this point we're still talking about 500 years ago. She decided that she was going to go back up there and look for this treasure because she feels like her father was adamant that this thing existed and she wanted to help her people. And she went up there and she died too.
Oh, and I love Bona. I think she's like one of the prettiest NPCs we've ever gotten. Like, I saw her and fell in love.
Did she give you a bona?
No. No. But I was just like, I was so excited to like when we met her, and I was like, I don't know who she is, but I love her. And then I found out she's dead.
Yeah.
You were like, I love her even more.
I was like, yes, traumatize me, Bona.
I don't know if this part is something we learn afterwards. She actually dies hiding a piece of pyrophosphorite It's not phosphorite. I want to say phosphorite, but it's pyrophosphorite from Kukuklan. He's up there, like, and she's at that point, like, he was still somehow involved in that thing. And she was kind of trying to, like, trying to just stop him, basically. And this is a thing that we end up using in our quest to unlock secrets within
Mhm.
the spacecraft, the Serpent spacecraft as well.
It is pyrophosphorite, by the way.
Phosphorite?
Yeah, pyrophosphorite.
Okay. Like, that's a real one. I don't know why I wrote it really dumb.
So basically, while Bona's up there, she runs into our deadbeat Dragon Sage dad
Yeah.
doing God knows what in his dead son's kingdom that has gone dead.
She's like, you're not good, dude. Like, I gotta imagine there was some conversation that also went along with this, So she had to have known, like, he had to be, like, giving off bad vibes. She's like, red flag, I ain't helping you. But this is how her father died too, so that we can assume that Kukulkan actually killed them too.
Oh, generational trauma.
Yeah. The reason why Adventurers would know Bona is because, like I said, she is a part of our quest later on once we do make it over to Ochkanalan, which I know that you're going to step through our path into the present day. But we do end up getting to meet her up there, and that's how we see that she's pretty.
Gorgeous.
She's gorgeous.
Yeah, and that's really, like Tiff said, that's all the ancientness. No one is really allowed to go out there ever again. And the Flower Feather clan actually starts to do, like, flying patrols to make sure no one's over there. Except for us, because we can do whatever we want.
Yeah. I mean, because, like, people are, like, things are attacking us, but when are they not attacking us? Like, I don't think they didn't try and keep us out at all.
Now, do you think the reason they were patrolling and making sure no one went over there is because of the scary fucking dragon flying in circles around it
Yeah, I'm sure.
that attacks anything that comes nearby?
I mean, the flying dragon wasn't there when we went.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah,
yeah,
what?
Oh, the flying dragon wasn't as there when I went after the Archon.
No, it has nothing to do with the Archon.
No? He was still flying around back then? Oh, shit, he was.
Yeah.
Oh, my God, we follow him. Oh.
Yeah.
Where? Oh, my God, I'm sorry. Yeah. I blocked this motherfucker out of my head so bad.
When the Ochkan update came out, right, where we got Ochkanatlan and we could, like, go explore it or whatever, I was in Discord and all I wanted to do was open up the waypoints in the Statue of the Seven, right? That's all I didn't want to do any of the lore. And I'm walking my little albedo ass over to the Statue of the Seven, and all of a sudden this dragon started to fucking attack me. And I was in Discord with Tiff, and I was like, I don't know what's happening. I'm being attacked by a dragon. I didn't even do anything. I picked a flower. Like, I don't understand.
You picked his flower.
I was like, I just wanted a sweet flower, damn it. Like, it was, like, wild. I was like, I don't understand what's happening.
Yeah. Maybe that's why I've had trauma for you, and I've blocked it out. That is crazy how much I've blocked that dragon out, because there's a lot of dragons and a lot of different types of dragons that go on in Ochka and then over in the volcano and stuff. Not always real ones, but
Yeah.
we have mechanical ones as well. But, like, there's a lot of dragon shit going on.
So then what brings us all to Ochkanatlan besides, me trying to open waypoints? What is our lore reason for being there?
So the lore that leads us to Ochkanatlan starts all the way back in the storyline of our companion Little One, that Saurian that you get to name when you first get to Natlan. We're going to end up doing an episode on Little One's story, so we're not going to go into too much detail about it because we are going to cover that in a later episode. But there's some basic background information that is helpful to know of what leads us into Ochkanatlan in current day Teyvat.
One of the things that, though, is not important, but I think everybody needs to know. What did we name our little ones? Because they all have their own names. Mine is Roly Poly, because when I saw him, that was the first thing I could say was, I was like, oh my God, he's so Roly Poly.
Mine is Bonky Chalk.
And mine is rightfully named Toru from Fruits Basket.
It all comes back to Fruits Basket.
Yep.
Always. You can tell what content I like. I'm pretty passionate about my things.
So after meeting Little One, we go through a bunch of different stuff, but we later run into a researcher from the Saurian Relics Association named, guess what, Monku.
Sus.
It's important to note that this is new Monku, not old Monku.
No love triangle for this guy.
Right. New Monku is current day Monku. So Monku is like, oh, hey, I noticed that your little one there is different from other Chapetlosaurs because of the mark on his horn, which is the Flame Lord's blessing. And Saurians with that mark usually have incredible power compared to others. He then explains to us that this Flame Lord's blessing is a power that originates from the ancient Natlan dragons, which, if you think back to that point in time when you're entering Natlan, you were probably super excited. Now you're like, where are the real dragons?
Literally.
And he says modern day Saurians can't withstand that power because it's just too much for them. He says that the Waiau and the Night Kingdom reject Saurians with that power, and that Saurians with that power often get killed by it or they are driven mad by it. So we're basically like, oh shit, Baki Chalk's gonna die, y'all.
Stop.
So he's like, no, don't worry about it. You can save your little one by taking him on a pilgrimage to the volcano that you see shooting lava out in the background.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
So excited.
He tells us that, a legend says that warriors used to carry a token split in two, and in the Great Volcano, they would wash the name of their companion as remembered by the fallen dragon, Chukoatl, that would gain the Saurian, the Night Kingdom's blessing, and would allow him to enter the Night Kingdom when he dies to be reunited with all souls. Now, I don't know about y'all, but I definitely suspect that new Monku is actually Kukulkan in disguise.
I did too.
We can get to the reason behind that and here in a little bit. This conversation and this interaction kind of sets us off on our mission to find these two split pieces of this quote unquote token, which we find out are called the Golden Entreaties. So that's kind of like the majority of our mission with Little One is finding these two Golden Entreaties so that we can take them to the volcano to remove the Flame Lord's blessing from Little One so that they survive and don't go crazy. And then it's also important to note that we find one of the entreaties prior to arriving in Ochkonatlan, and we are told that the other one is in Ochkonatlan.
So we have to go get it, of course.
Yeah.
Because everything has at least 35 steps.
Yeah. If you're wondering what the Golden Entreaties are, we do find out that they are made from the eye of Chukoatl after Xbalanque splits his eye in two. And the reason for this is Chukoatl had turned one of his eyes into a conduit for the authority governing all flames, and it was basically his only weakness. This is after he sort of reemerges from the abyss and comes back after Nibelung shows up, and he's corrupted by abyssal powers, but he does still have enough power to sort of convert his eye into this conduit that gives this really special authority of governing, phlogiston and flames and everything.
And just a quick recap, the Brandon is talking about, in case you forgot the name, the original Pyro Dragon.
Yes, the Pyro Dragon Sovereign.
He is abyssal, corrupted. He is splitting his eye. Well, Xbalanque is splitting his eye. There's a lot happening.
Yeah, so these two entreaties are one half of that special eye of the Pyro Dragon Sovereign. We find out that one of those entreaties was kept by Xbalanque, a human. The other was given to a dragon, which is Kukulkan, the Sage of the Stolen Flame. And they make a pact that they are going to keep them separate so humans and dragons would both have equal power.
Which, can we just talk about for a second? Because we didn't think about this all in the lore, but basically, Ochkon's best friend and dad, slash brother, slash creator, slash whatever, they're the two who had these entries. And isn't that just a little odd, too? And he probably had no idea.
Wait, say that again? Ochkon and who?
Oh, no, Xbalanque.
Xbalanque and Kukulkan both had the two entreaties,
Mm-hmm.
and Ochkon was BFFs with one and daddy brother to the other.
Oh, yeah.
It's just like the two most important people in his life.
Yes,
basically. And he probably had no idea.
Mhm.
He hates one and loves the other.
Yeah, and I feel like he might hate both of them if he
I
found
wonder,
out
yeah, I
this.
wonder how he would feel if they when he found out that they both had the golden entreaty.
I don't know if he knew Kukulkan had the other one, but
He definitely knew about Xbalanque. Yeah.
yeah, because he ends up with it.
Yeah.
And then so we find Kukulkan's golden entreaty first in these underground ruins and elsewhere in Natlan. And that is prior to us arriving in Ochkanatlan, because we are told that the second golden entreaty is in Ochkanatlan, which would be, of course, Xbalanque's one.
Okay. So we end up going to Ochkanatlan in search of the entreaty.
Yes.
And what did you think it would be the other way around? Like I would have imagined Xbalanque's would have been over in the mainland and Kukulkan's would have been over in Ochkanatlan.
No, because Xbalanque gave his to Ochka, right? Like, so.
Yeah, I think that's the only reason. But I know what you mean, Tiff, because I thought that was a little odd too, because of the history of Ochkanatlan. I just expected Kukulkan to be over there.
Yeah.
But I guess Kukulkan's was, well, we'll talk about that in the little one episode.
So then we go to Ochkanatlan, we find out about this dragon, and we are led around by this little adorable bird guy who ends up being,
He's so cute.
and he's also the subconscious of Ochkan.
But we don't know that at first. At first he's just the companion of Bona.
Yeah, who we also don't know is a ghost.
I think first we meet Bona, right?
Yeah.
So we arrive in Ochkanatlan, we get attacked by a scary dragon. We're like, what the fuck?
Literally.
And then we find these old notes from an adventurer who is like, I'm going into this area to look for the Jade of Return. And Paimon's like, ooh, the Jade of Return. I bet we could get a lot of money for that. Let's go find it. And then we eventually meet the adventurer who wrote those notes, which is Bona. And that's when we also meet the cute little quote unquote guardian spirit of the area. Kokuik.
Kokuik. The best is about Kokuik, though, is as we continue down this path of doing our quests and stuff like that, he gets cuter and cuter. Like he gets like restored as we find stuff.
Uh-huh.
And it's adorable.
He is really cute.
The whole time, though, we're also like slightly confused. Or I was slightly confused.
I'm slightly confused.
I was very confused. Yeah.
Bona was just like, she was on a mission and she was like, me and Kokuik, we're going to take you to places. We're going to get this done. And
Yeah.
she actually brings us up to the way station of our space elevator. And we're like, what? Space elevator? What are the physics?
She's like, I'm traveling in the footsteps of my father who disappeared, searching for this Jade of Return. And yeah, and then Kokuik seems to be like helping her traverse the area, and it's basically the only reason that she hasn't been killed by the dragon flying around.
Or so we think.
Yeah.
Little did we know that she was dead.
She was dead. We were talking to a ghost.
Yeah, a little memory ghost.
Mm-hmm. Did she know she was a ghost at that point, though? I don't think she did.
I don't
know if she ever knew.
Yeah, I think she thought she was just redoing the same thing over and over again. I wonder how many times she had to redo this.
I read a part of, I don't know if it was cited as to where this came from, but something in the lore interpreted her memory ghost thing as being kind of activated or controlled by Kokuik.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I feel like that would make a lot of sense if like Kokuik is sort of like the mind of Ochkan that is powering the city, then maybe it would have the power to like reproduce those memories or something.
And it seems like Ochkan is trying to help us at this point too.
Yeah. Ochkan's not hating on the people anymore.
He might be a little
Or
bit.
at least the mind of Ochkan.
Yeah, the mind of Ochkan has moved over to the side of that humans are good again.
Yeah.
Or worthy, at least.
So we find out that, as we mentioned earlier, Ochkan at one point had split his mind from his soul and body, put it into the new core of Chulel to act as the power source for Ochkanatlan, and was stuck there. And we find out that his mind remained stuck there in the power source until many years ago, Bona freed it. And then Kokuik, which was, I guess, the physical version of, his trapped mind. And so she freed it, named it Kokuik, having no idea it was Ochkan's mind, and then later was killed by Kukulkan. So I'm assuming Kokuik has just been kind of flying around pretending like Bona was with them for many, many years.
Went mad all over again.
Or maybe saw us and then was like, oh, let me create Bona.
Let me get the pretty lady.
Yeah.
Well, do you think that because Bona hid the phosphorite from Kukulkan, that led Ochkan's consciousness to kind of have like a change of mind about the humans too, and like it would make sense that he would like later be like, oh, this human did what I wanted, right? This
Oh,
human
maybe.
defied like a dragon sage and died at the hands of it and was kind to me and blah blah blah. And maybe like that's why he's like, I'm gonna bring back this person who changed my mindset.
Yeah.
But didn't Ochkan already love humans?
Once he was dead?
Well, I'm wondering if she was the change for him in his like post-death love of humans. Because we do know that Ochkan ends up liking humans again, but we don't know when.
But I thought Ochkan always liked humans.
Well, he did, and then he turned a little tyranny. Didn't like him very much then when he was power hungry.
Yeah.
I understand what you're saying, Brandon. Like he was doing everything for the humans, but
Right.
he wasn't kind
It was
to
like
humans at the same
anti-dragon.
time.
Yeah.
But I would think that maybe, and maybe it's something different, but I think Bona struck a chord in him for some reason.
Yeah, maybe it helped calm his frenzy and like soothe the violent side of him.
And I think the fact that she went against her father, so maybe that's really it, right? Is like defied his father, therefore defied a dragon, human for the win. I'm going to use her as my spirit guide in the future.
Yeah, I could see that.
I will say something very sad, in my opinion, is that Bona's glasses are still up in the sky. You can go see them. When you go up to the base for the space elevator, you can still go up there right now, and there's a little like waypoint that kind of looks like a triangle, and it's a place. It's not. I guess it's a location that you can directly transport to, and her glasses are still there. And there is like a note from her that you can read underneath it that is kind of like the last note that she leaves before dying, basically. And I don't know, I just feel like Ochkan was like, I get it now. And something clicked in his head. I don't know what it was, but it clicked with her.
Yeah.
And then we end up finding out that she's dead. And then we fight the dragon again, which is like the other half of Ochkan.
Right. So, yeah, the soul and body of Ochkan, once separated from the mind, was taken by Kukulkan, and he turned it into like a conduit for abyssal energy, which turned it somehow into a fell dragon.
We love fell dragons and fell
Mhm.
things. Fell flowers, fell dragons. What's next?
And that becomes the dragon of the city of the flowing ash.
Yeah, so that's the crazy dragon that's been flying around, attacking anyone, devouring the souls of anyone who come to the Cinder City.
Oh yeah, that we never mentioned that. That Ochkanatlan's nickname is Cinder City because everything was burned.
Yeah, I know that really tickled you. It's because everything's burned, you guys.
Everything was,
Everything's
burned.
Everyone was caught on fire. Everyone's toast.
Everyone was a burnt toast. No strokes here, guys. Just death.
No, what?
Toast?
Oh, toast. I thought you said strokes.
Oh, I
I'm
did
like,
say no strokes because there was no burnt toast. Like we weren't smelling burnt toast.
oh, we
that
weren't
wasn't
having a
there.
stroke.
Oh my god.
No Guns N' Roses playing today, guys. For those who don't know, we have a friend that we play Genshin with a lot, good friend of ours, and we were playing Fortnite with them once, and they were like, guys, I hear Guns N' Roses. And we're like, what? We're like, are you playing music? And they're like, no. And we were also playing Fortnite with the person they lived with, but they were in separate rooms playing. And so they were like, I gotta go check on him. And we really thought that he was like having a stroke or something. We're like, do you smell burnt toast? And it ended up that they're like Siri, like they're either their Alexa or their Google or whatever had heard them say something about guns. Because we were playing Fortnite and just started playing Welcome to the Jungle by Guns N' Roses.
But like very low and only like, so like it wasn't loud, like, but so it was kind of
Welcome
like,
to the
wait, is this
jungle.
coming through the
We've got fun
game?
and games. Like that was like That was it. It was amazing. So, if you ever think you're having a stroke, do you smell toast and do you hear Guns N' Roses? Is the way of life, guys.
Meanwhile, like half the people in New Jersey making breakfast are like, oh shit.
The one day I will always remember I was driving home from somewhere and my halfway home was like where my cousin was going to college. So I was like, oh, do you want to meet up for breakfast? Like I'll take you out to breakfast type of thing. And we did. And we're like sitting in this diner. And I was like, oh my God, I smell burnt toast. Am I dying? And I was like, Amanda, you're in a diner at breakfast.
Yeah. It used to happen in my office a lot because the return valves we were at like the end of the air conditioning. So I'd be sitting there and I'm like, I could see the toaster in my eye line. And I'm like, there's nothing being toasted in there. And I would go into the other room to my coworker and be like, do you smell the toast? Is it like, am I like, is it me? Am I having a stroke? Can we just check this?
But anyway, the Fell Dragon.
Yeah, so the Fell Dragon is, the soul and body of Ochkan twisted with turned into an abyssal conduit by Daddy Kukulkan. And it devours the souls of anyone who enters the Cinder City. And so eventually, we're running around with Kukuik. Kukuik is basically shooting lasers at the Fell Dragon, eventually gets it to crash down, and Kukuik reunites with it. And then it reveals the truth of Kukuik and the Fell Dragon as being the mind and then the body and soul of Ochkan. So we find that out, and then they decide we're going to have one last fight with the reunited Ochkan to put it out of its misery, which we do. And so Ochkan is finally dead.
D-E-A-D, dead.
And we find out, when Xbalanque entered the Sacred Flame and things were kind of handed over to Ochkan, of course, ended up with that golden entreaty, and he hid that in the Sky Serpent ship, the Tonatia, or however the hell you say it. I'm going to call it Tonatia. So he hid it in the Tonatia ship up in the sky because of how dangerous and powerful it is. And after, we defeat Ochkan, we obtain that second golden entreaty. And, along the way, we find out that this Jade of Return that we were searching for was actually, of course, the golden entreaty. And we find out that Kukulkan after Ochkan had hidden the golden entreaty and Tonatia, Kukulkan later spread rumors among the tribes that there was treasure on Tonatia to lure people to it. And I don't know if this is confirmed, but it seems like he was luring people to it. I mean, it could have been to just test them to see if they could get through it and get the golden entreaty and then be strong enough to go to the volcano. But it could also be that he's luring people over there so that the Fell Dragon can devour their souls, because it seems like the more souls that the Fell Dragon consumes, it allows Kukulkan to use those people's appearances and present himself as a human and infiltrate the tribes. And he actually says that he does that, and that this isn't the first time we've met him, which is why, of course, I think it makes sense that the new Monku that we met earlier in the Little One storyline, who sent us on, basically started us out on this whole journey, I think it's safe to say that that's probably Kukulkan disguised as, I'm thinking, maybe the original Monku.
Especially because we don't get a lot of name duplicates in this game.
Yeah.
So of all names Monku to repeat, give me a triple Cyrus, but a double Monku doesn't make sense.
Right. Oh, the triple Cyrus you're fine with?
Yeah, I mean, Cyrus seems like a more common name. I don't know.
You know what? What's the Cyrus? That's the Cyrus Sumpter Beast. That really should have been called the triple Cyrus Sow Cow.
Now, I did want to bring up two quick things about dead Ochkan. One is that you can still go see the body of Ochkan. They did not get rid of it after the quest, so it's still in that little cave that you leave him in. You can go, take some selfies with him if you want. Which also, when I was doing this quest, a few days before I did it, I was also in Discord with Tiff, and I was like, Tiff, what's this island off the coast of Ochcon? Like, and I swam there. I don't know if I swam there. I might have flown there, ice bridge there. I got there. And I literally said to Tiff, and Tiff, I hope you remember this. I said, I really feel like this is here for some reason. Like, why would they just put an island here? Do you think this is going to come up again? And it was like, oh, I don't know. And I was like, I don't know. This seems really sus because it was such a big island.
Mm-hmm.
And then literally like 3 nights later, I was in Discord doing this quest, and I was like, it's real. It was important. But there's one other interesting fact about this area, and actually, you and I were talking about it the other night, Tiff. So back in Sitlali's nation, the Master of the Night Winds, there are those like tapestries that are circular that you can go into, and like
Woven scroll.
the woven scrolls. There's 3 of them that you can find throughout that area that have puzzles.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, if you make it through these paths and these puzzles and stuff, you get to this final room. And you have to unlock all 3 areas, and like, because there's like a golden, door in front of them. So if you're able to finish all 3 quests, you get a treasure, and then there's another woven thing, and it is actually an elevator. And like the elevator brings you to this random room.
Mm-hmm.
And the random room, and there's treasure in it, of course, but if you look out the window of the random room, you can see the Fell Dragon.
Oh, you can I didn't notice that when I was up there. I
Yes.
finally did make it through it.
But yeah, that was like my biggest takeaway when I went through and finally finished it. Because I was trying to 100% the area, and I knew there was a treasure chest over there, and I wasn't sure how to get to it. And I was all excited. I got this random treasure, and then I was like, wait a second, is that what I think it is? Because also, I knew based off the interactive map where this treasure chest was that I was looking for. And I originally went out to the Fell Dragon and thought that maybe I was missing something. But there's a bunch of walls and stuff that keep you from really exploring too hard.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I don't understand, how am I supposed to get this? And that's when I ended up looking into it and like finding it and stuff. But yeah, it was super crazy and weird. I know, Tiff, you said you've done it. I don't know, Brandon, if you've
Yeah.
gotten that chest.
Where was this again?
So in Masters of the Nightwind, there are 3 of the, what are they called, Tiff?
Woven scroll.
There's 3 woven scrolls, and each one of them transports you to like a stairwell.
Oh, yeah.
And when you unlock the last one, it can unlock like this elevator thing that takes you to like a hidden room.
Yes, I've done that.
Okay, yeah, if you had looked out the window at the time, that hidden room showed you the Fell Dragon.
Interesting. I didn't. I remember going up the elevator. I don't remember seeing the Fell Dragon. Or maybe I didn't figure it out because I remember being like, wait, there's some kind of weird puzzle thing happening here. So maybe I never finished it and I just left.
Maybe.
I do remember going up the elevator and being like, what's going on here? Because I was just looking for something else.
Well, the elevator's the last part of it. So if you got on
Mhm.
the elevator, you made it into that room.
Okay, I probably just didn't look.
I was so curious because I had been looking for this fucking treasure and I knew the location of it. So I was like, why is it out in the middle of the water? I don't understand. I think it's also called like the Nursery of Nightmares or something like that. Like so extra.
Yeah.
I love that.
I can't see the dragon's corpse, but I can see the area where the dragon's corpse is. But yeah, those are my like little two senses on the Ochka Natlon body yada yada. The Ochka body yada yada.
Oh, the body.
Most of the stuff we've talked about so far has been in 2 World Quest series. One of them is Lost Traveler in the Ashen Realm. That's the majority with like Bona and Kokuik and all of that. And then a lot of what we talked about is also in Open Your Heart to Me, which is the Ishlil quest line, where we find her trapped in the giant dragon statue and we have to go and actually find the little pieces of her ripped up heart and we end up freeing her and putting her to rest. There are two other quest series that make appearances in Ochkanatlan. One of them is called In the Footsteps of the Chosen Dragons. That's a series of all these random world quests throughout Natlan that involve Little One. Only one of them actually takes place in Ochkanatlan, and that is a quest called the Lone Isle named Night. And that is done at an area in Ochkanatlan called the Isle of Tozos, or Tosos, which is a small island in the northeast area of Ochkanatlan.
Mhm.
And that's the one that allows you to incubate a saurian egg. Do you remember this?
No, you mentioned this prior to recording, and I don't think I've incubated an egg.
Okay, so if you look up Isle of Tozos, I think you just have to go there to get this quest, maybe. So just go to it and explore and like do whatever puzzles are there. And at some point, you'll get to put a saurian egg in an incubator.
Mm-hmm.
That egg later ends up in Little One's resting area, which is like that early part of Natlan where those weird translucent columns are, and you like get transported into his little hideaway where you first meet him. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
So if you go into the resting area later after you incubate the egg, the saurian egg is like in there, like on a little nest, and Little One's basically watching over it until it hatches.
Oh, I love him.
Which is also why on the Hoyo Lab online, I guess you could do it in the app as well as in your browser. You can actually incubate it as Saurian as well.
Oh, wasn't that like a Kanichi event?
No, I think it was just always there. Like it was like a Notlon thing.
Yeah.
Oh, I remember that like web event with like Kanichi and everything where you could
Oh
like
yeah,
do the
that was
eggs.
separate. Yeah.
So after you finish all of Little One's main quest line, but then also complete all of these like interactable things that are like hidden, which I don't think I've even done all of them yet because there's so many of them involving Little One. But if you do all of them and you finish his whole quest line, and then you finish the final world quest that ties all of that up called Someday We All Must Walk Alone, I believe, I think it's 2 days later, the egg hatches and it gives you the Aguara pet that you can put in your teapot. So you get a little Tapetlosaur that you can put inside your teapot.
Oh.
His name is Aguara, which is when you incubate the egg, you find a note of like the person that was like taking care of the eggs on that island. And they were like, I'm going to name this one Aguara. So
Oh,
I haven't finished all of I actually ran into another one today. I feel like I'm constantly running into his little...
there's so many of them.
Yeah.
I was gonna say like even like this earlier today, I was doing the research for this, and I was in Ochkanatlan, which I have 100%ed, and I found a treasure chest. Like it's just like it never ends.
I thought I had done all of Little One's stuff, but then I went and checked the resting area and the egg is still not hatched. So apparently, and I don't think I received the quest Someday We All Must Walk Alone, because I think you get that like a day or two after you finish the Little One quest line. So I still haven't done everything, I guess. I got to get on that.
Yeah, me too. Don't worry.
You know, from In the Footsteps of the Chosen Dragons, there's one other world quest in the Ochkanatlan area called Twisted Extension. And that is, I'm going to guess his name is pronounced Kaneen's quest line. Kaneen was an adventurer from the Flower Feather clan who died in Ochkanatlan. And in that area, when you encounter him, he definitely looks abyssal. And you're like, what is going on here? And you find out that a mimic, which, you know, you find out in this area that the abyss can create mimics that look like other things and people. And so this mimic took the appearance of Kaneen and eventually came to believe that it was the true Kaneen. So you see this mimic that looks like a Flower Feather clan fighter fighting other mimics in this area. It's like Abyss fighting the Abyss. It's fascinating because it thinks that it really is the person whose appearance it stole. And so Travelers like interacts with it and fights alongside it a few times, but then eventually Traveler finds the true Kaneen's corpse. And this causes the mimic's mental state to just like immediately deteriorate, and it ends up attacking the Traveler.
My mental state too, Kanie. Don't worry.
Yeah.
Traumatizing.
Yeah, then we kill it.
Oh,
And then death.
It's so funny because I've definitely interacted with him. I don't know if I've gotten to that point yet, but I'm like,
Uh-huh.
oh, all right, R.I.P., I guess.
Oshkosh Land's so interesting because it really is like the land of putting things to rest.
I thought you were going to say it's the land of pudding. I swear I thought you were saying pudding.
Pudding, chocolate. No, it really is. It's like you put the Kenine mimic to rest. You put Ishlel to rest. You put Ochkan to rest.
Hmm.
A lot of resting.
When do we put a how to rest? No, I love him. Don't do it to me. I think I would cry.
Well, I think the main question when we leave is when do we put Kukulkan to rest?
Oh my God, I never. I feel like that bitch is never gonna die.
So you will find out more about Kukulkan as you continue the little one storyline. Now that at the end of all this, you now have both of the entreaties, and you know that you can now go to the volcano to try to remove the Flame Lord's blessing from little one.
It's a wild ride.
Yeah. Again, like we said, we will cover that in a upcoming episode.
Yeah, we'll be definitely diving into a lot of little one lore and everything like that. On that note, though, I do think I am Och cut out.
And we're gonna Oach crash after this.
Yeah, I need a quick trip to Mondstadt. Not that we're not already in Mondstadt. So we're actually Q-Rabra's here, and we're going to answer some mail now, if y'all are ready for that.
Let's do it.
We have a few messages from travelers this week. Our first message is going to come from Matt, and they said, so this is a rough question to be asked, but if there was a playable character that you have in the game that somehow dies in the game and then gets removed as a playable character, who would you be crushed by? I know they never actually make a playable character become non-playable, but this is hypothetical. And they said that theirs would be Chaska, who is their main. So they'd be really upset if Chaska were to die and then become unplayable.
I was excited to hear about a Chaska main.
Yeah,
I've never.
I love that. I mean, she's a great character. I mean,
Yeah, she is.
she's very mainable.
I would say that while the ones who would be most devastating just from my team itself would be Raiden or Arlecchino, because they're always in my team. But I would say like my emotionally that I would be really hurt by would be if Rosario was gone.
Mm,
Shimoji babe.
right. Yeah, my gut reaction was to go with Kazuha because I've had him as at least a co-main for a very long time. So I'm just so used to having him in my party and using him for combat. But emotionally, for me, the most devastating death, I think, would be Kale. And that's because Kale has been through so much hardship throughout her life, has been a part of the universe from the manga. So basically before the game.
The true day one.
And she has shown, I think, the most growth of any character. I mean, if you're not rooting for Kale, you have no soul because I mean, you want to talk about, I know the word trauma is overused, these days, but Kale's been through like for real trauma. And it's like to the point where she almost didn't survive her trauma. You know what I mean? Like if you go through the manga, it's like, whoa, she went to some really dark places.
Yeah.
And to see that she's like built herself up and has created a life and is starting to accomplish things and is learning. And she's just like leaps and bounds from where she was when she started. So if her life was cut short, it would be like, all of her accomplishments, not to mention like her potential for the future. I think it would just hurt so much more.
Yeah, especially seeing her like healed of the Elazar and everything now too on top of that. It's like,
Yeah.
she got better for what? And then we're also so attached to her father figures now that it's like, I'm so attached to her father figures now.
Yeah.
To also have to watch them go through that pain would be like heartbreaking.
Mhm.
as
Yeah.
well.
Like you feel like she's like, it feels like she's like the baby of all the characters in a way, even though she's not the youngest.
No.
Like there are like actual like babies that we think of, like Chi-Chi or someone, but Kale, I just feel like has been put through the ringer and in a way that we've all been along the ride on. Like it's not
Yeah.
like all these things happen to her and then we're catching up to her like many, many years later. It's like we've
No.
seen all of these things happen to her and we've seen all of the growth that she's done. It's all happened either right before that we started playing the game or like while we've been playing the game.
Yeah, I mean, we met an angry, spiteful kid in the manga, and now we
Yeah.
have like a
Who was basically
spiteful,
suicidal.
basically suicidal, had been experimented on, had basically broken out of a cult, had been
Mhm.
abandoned by her parents, even if they thought they were doing it for the greater good.
Tortured by the people who took her.
Experimented on,
Yeah.
and basically kicked out of every city she ever tried to go to until she met Amber.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of characters for me that I would be upset about, but I was recently actually put through the ringer with Albedo. And I was very worried. And I remember messaging, I think it was Brandon, being like, I don't know what I'm gonna do. I was like, I always joke that when this game ends, I'm gonna have to like take a week off from work to mourn because something will happen that I won't be happy with. And I was like, I might have to call out sick the day after I do this quest. Like, I don't know what's gonna happen. And I really thought about like, oh my God, what if like would I be able to play Albedo if he became evil, if he died, if he XYZ'd, you know?
Mhm.
And I really had to think about that, which was terrible for me. So I'm gonna say Albedo just because it was so recent that I did have to think about this. Although you're right, Matt, they wouldn't have taken Albedo away from me at least, but I don't know. I might have had to have taken him away from myself.
I was going to say, though, how do you feel when they actually kill off Lisa?
It's
How
not
you
gonna
gonna
You
feel
think
about
they
that?
will?
That's been the rumor from the very beginning that she was going to die.
I know, but I don't know. No.
I mean, the whole thing is that her life was cut short because she saw something she shouldn't have saw.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that it means it's going to die soon.
Yeah, but that didn't officially make it into the game either, right?
I thought her seeing something that she shouldn't have saw. Oh, but the fact that it's going to shorten her life wasn't there.
Yeah, we know she saw something she shouldn't have seen in the academia, and that's what made her want to get the fuck out of there.
Yeah.
I will say that we are good friends with Renova now, I think. You know, the Shade of Death.
Mhm.
And I might have some connections to the Shade of Life now too. If you know, you know. So I don't know. I'm gonna pull some strings if they kill Lisa.
All right.
Oh, okay. I got you.
But anyway, Matt, thank you for the question. It was heartbreaking.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, Matt.
Our next message comes from Rai, and they said, what songs would you assign to your favorite Genshin ships? I would like to note that this is plural. I would personally assign Red Wine Supernova to Bei Guang and Ophelia for Diluc and Jean.
I love the Red Wine Supernova one. That's like so perfect for them.
Red Wine Supernova is by who again? I know it.
It's Chapel Roan.
Oh, what?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm thinking of Supernova. Just Supernova.
The champagne supernova in the sky.
No, I'm not thinking of that. I'm thinking of Supermassive Black Hole.
Oh, Muse.
Muse. I'm thinking of Muse. And then Ophelia is sung by the Lumineers. It's just in case anyone wants to listen to the
Yeah.
songs. I'm going to go first with this one because I was really excited about this question. First off, I want everyone to know that the doc auto-corrected fiends to ferns again. I'm just slowly becoming Ashley Johnson's character in Critical Role. So I picked my top 5 ships because I have no self-control. And I feel like this is a demonstration of self-control to a point. So my first ship is Shang Yun and Xing Shao, and I chose the song Like or Like by Miniature Tigers. There's actually a fan animation on YouTube that I heard this song playing and I was like, oh my God, it's literally them. It's like, do you like me or do you like me? And it's very like innocent and playful and like I came to your house and then I fucked it up and I left and I forgot to do it and type of thing. It's very like them coded, a little awkward, you know?
Mhm.
Then I picked Sino and Tignari, and I picked Here With Me by David, but spelled with a 4. It's D4 vid. And I think that song, the idea of it is like, as long as you're here, I'm going to be okay. And I feel like that's very the two of them ever since they met in the academia and got together. From Sino knowing his fucking pen ink.
And the anecdote.
and the antidote. And then Sino, mentions that Tignari says he really should do something to celebrate his birthday and relax this year in his birthday art, even though he doesn't do it. They're always there for each other, and I think that song is perfect for the two of them. For Hu Tao and Zhao, I picked Bad Habit by Steve Lacy. The idea of it is like, you never shoot your shot, and if I knew you liked me, I would do it, but I don't know what to do. And I think that's perfect for the two of them because it's, Hu Tao's boss and Zhao's dad connects them a little bit. And I always refer back to Lantern Rite with the kites, where Zhang Li was flying Hu Tao's kite and Zhao appeared thinking it was Hu Tao. And he was like shooting his shot and then fucked up. And so I think that song fits pretty well with the two of them. For Albedo and Kaya, because Nat isn't in the game, I picked Ordinary by Alex Warren. It's pretty popular on TikTok, if you're on TikTok. But the song is very magical, and for me, the idea of Kai and Albedo, they have a magical relationship of being the Conrian connects, and if they would fucking connect over it, they would have a deep understanding of one another, and I just think it would be a very magical and unordinary feeling for the two of them. And so I gave that to them, a feeling of belonging. And then my last one is Child and Lumine. I gave them You Get Me So High by The Neighborhood. It's kind of like the idea of like, are we good for each other? Because like I get so high when we're together, but then I'm really not sure if this is okay. And I definitely get that vibe from the two of them.
Uh-huh.
So travelers know too, we're going to put these into a playlist over on our Spotify, where you can also find the Twink Tank and our Genshin faves and our music that we just really love from our mixtape episode. But you'll be able to find it and listen to all these songs again as well.
All right, so mine, I only have two, and one, I'm gonna go with the song "Slip Away" by Perfume Genius, and I'm gonna have that as a Eulamber song, specifically Amber singing it to Eula, like it would be from Amber's perspective. The other one is, I don't have a particular ship in mind, but it's the perfect song for anyone to dedicate to Neuvillette. So if there's any character that you pair with Nuvi in your mind, this would be the song that they would dedicate to him. And that is Here Comes the Rain Again by the Eurythmics.
Oh my God. I love that.
Yeah, just read the lyrics of that song and you'll be like, oh my God. It is like the love song to Neuvillette.
As a big Neuvillette Risley shipper, I will be thinking about that later tonight.
Yeah.
So mine, I went with three. Jean and Diluc is my OG. Like, to me, the one of the few, to me, like written out like romances in the story. I've always felt like it's just always been kind of right in there. And I picked I Will Follow You Into the Dark by Death Cab for Cutie. The song is very much about doing anything and everything for a loved one, even including going to the afterlife with them. And I feel like Jean and Diluc would put themselves into any situation for one another, no matter the outcome. And I feel like, if there is a big battle that ends up at the end of the story, I feel like they would be there, and that would be their.
And they'll die together.
They'll die together. Yeah, they're gonna die together.
I hate it here.
When Mondstadt blows up.
We know one of those brothers have to die.
Yeah. My other one that I have always is a very ingrained one is Ningguang Beidou, and I chose The Thousand Years by Christina Perri. I just feel like they are destined for one another, and they start off in these foes, and like I feel like they've always been meant to be together. And I feel like no matter what they do in their lives, they would always end up back to one another.
That is a pretty song for them.
And my last one is Movica and Capitano, the romance that could have been. And I think partly I've seen some art that is just beautiful between them, but I also think I love the ship name of Capri Sun. Just cracks me up. But I gave them the song I Caught Fire by The Used because, fire.
Cute.
It's a song though about like really like, going up against all odds for for the person that you love, and them just being completely devoted and head over heels over them, but also fire.
I think these are great songs, and I'm honestly I haven't heard the Perfume Genius one, and I haven't heard I Caught Fire. So I'm definitely
You
adding
heard
those.
Slip Away because I used it in Sandra's wedding video.
Okay, so I've heard it. I just didn't know what it was.
Right.
But it was a beautiful song. Both songs you used in that video I adored. So maybe I'll add it to my normal
It's
playlist.
like the fast, energetic one.
The faster one.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Now I'm just gonna go rewatch the wedding video and cry because it was a beautiful fucking wedding. And Brandon and I got yelled at by a photographer. And then I thought about sassing her, but I didn't because we were in Disney. And I'm Amanda. I'm never gonna truly sass anyone. But that's besides the point.
I think you would. I've seen it happen a little bit when we were in line at the Genshin pop-up, and then they were like, "Go home," and you were like, "Excuse me, what did you say? What about this?
Oh my God.
This doesn't really seem right. Don't you think that this isn't right, sir?"
So-
Did you think you should have told us?
So there's a little more content though. There's a little, so for travelers, you've probably heard our story about how the three of us tried to go to the Genshin pop-up in Brooklyn one day while it was like raining and I wore a beautiful Tignari raincoat. We drove to Brooklyn, we get there, and they're like, "Oh, we gave tickets out this morning that told you when you could come back," basically. But they never put that anywhere. Like it wasn't announced formally anywhere. And I was definitely being snippy because my mom had died like 2 weeks beforehand. And I was so excited. I was like, this is going to be the light of my life. Like, I was like, this is what's going to bring me out of the darkness. And then they were like, no. And I was like, what do you mean, no? What do you mean, no? I think I would have been nicer to the guy if, it'd been like 3 weeks prior.
You were very polite for how
Yeah.
mad you were.
Yeah. And
So
I think the
bad.
people around us appreciated too, because there were a lot of people around us who drove actually very far
Yeah.
to get there and had no idea. It was kind of like they just kind of hung us out to dry.
Yeah, there was literally the one person
In the
online
rain.
behind us was like, we drove
Yeah.
3 hours to get here. And I was like, what? Like, I thought we drove what, like an hour? Maybe
Yeah.
I was an hour and a
We-
half. Like,
We drove an hour from here, which was about 20 miles.
It was a
'Cause
shit show.
Traffic sucks.
And now anytime I bring up a Tavat goods to Brandon, he's like, But it's fine. We can buy a lot of the merch on Amazon now. Although
Yeah.
it's about the experience in the end. Like, I went to the Fontaine Museum that they did. I don't know. I guess museum is the wrong word. They did a exhibit
Mhm.
for Fontaine, and it was free. And I was first online for that. I was traumatized.
Like, I'm missing this.
Yeah, and it was beautiful. It was so fun. It was a great time. So, figure your shit out next time, event planners.
I just go to the Genshin store in LA now.
Oh my God, no, I'm so jealous when you go. I got my pins right next to me of Aventurine and Ratio. No, Aventurine and Dunhung. I immediately just say Aventurine and Ratio because they just belong together. But anyway, before I pick a song for them, thank you, Rye, for the question. Like Tiff said, we are going to have a playlist up in the description of the playlist. We will link to our website where you can see our picks. And if we decide to add any more to them, and we're going to add Rise to it because why not? 2 more songs, good songs. That being said, though, travelers, that is all the time that we have for today. If you liked this episode or you'd like to recommend topics for our next episode, please feel free to email Albedo at talesoftavatpod@gmail.com. You can also reach out directly to us on our Instagram, Tales of Tavat Pod, or Twitter, Tales of Tavat. You can additionally find us on Blue Sky and Threads under the same names. Travelers can also feel free to check out our Ko-fi, where you could buy us a cup of coffee. You could buy us some caffeinated beverages. Maybe we're going to move on to caffeine pills.
Oh,
Whatever, is going to keep us awake and happening that isn't meth while editing
I was
the
gonna
podcast.
say, like, why not just real speed at this point?
No. I've known meth addicts. It's not fun.
What about Coke? Well, we'll just do Coke.
No, I've also known coke addicts. It's not fun. So yeah, no hard drugs over here, but we're looking for stuff to stay awake because we spend a lot of long nights editing. the podcast, managing the website, and making sure that our YouTube videos and our website are accessible as well. We put a really strong emphasis on accessibility over here. We want to make sure that our stuff is accessible for all travelers who are interested in learning more about the lore. And that means that we have to pay a good amount of money for our editing softwares and for our web hosting and all that jazz. So any money that, gets donated or comes from our merch shop does go toward funding all the projects that we do to bring Tales of Tevat out of Angel Share's attic into you. Additionally, travelers can feel free to rate us wherever you listen to podcasts to let other travelers know that there are some deep diving splunkin funs going on over at Tales of Tevat. That being said, next week we're going to be pew-pewing our way through Mondstadt with the competition as we head over to the Cat's Tail to discuss Diona. Until then, safe journeys, travelers. We'll see you next time.
Bye, space elevator nerds. Take us past the firmament.
Beam me up, Scott.